We would also believe that broader public services are really, really important in enabling participation in social mobility, and that rights to access to housing and accommodation, culture, sports and recreation and transport systems are really important there, and therefore local government is very important in the whole concept of our public service delivery. In particular, we would believe that somebody spoke about privatisation earlier on. We would feel that there's a very clear case to be made in a new model of development that public utilities that are of benefit to all should remain in public control. There may be issues about how they're delivered, but the public control of those resources, like water, refuse and transport systems, is hugely important. And where they have gone out of public control, they should be brought back in to public control. So a fairly clear agenda around that type of thing. Lastly, I said there could be varieties of models of delivery, but any model of delivery really needs to focus on the equality and accommodating the diversity that there is in our society, and it's not something that we've gotten right in this model of development. Equal status, and I suppose it's here that we're mostly relating to the concept of equality. And just again, quoting from Richard's book, inequality as a general social dysfunction related to how people feel they are valued. And the Ryan report shows us the frightening consequences of a society that doesn't value all its people equally. And until we do value all our people equally, we are still exposed to future injustices, such as institutional injustices that we've got. And we can name some of them. We know some of the institutional injustices that are already going on in our prisons, in our asylum centres, in our treatment of care, our treatment of people with disabilities, our treatment of older people in institutional care. We know our vulnerabilities there, and we know our problem is that we aren't fundamentally treating or going out to treat all as equal. So this is a very important aspect of where we want to be with this model of development. So society and its institutions, us, need to appropriately and adequately value the diversity of groups that make up society. Not give it lip service, but appropriately and adequately give meaning to diversity by accommodating it more fully and eliminating all forms of discrimination. So this is a serious part of model development, accommodating that diversity that Stacia spoke about earlier on. And what we would be doing if we had that policy objective would be much more proactive in all sectors in taking action to promote equality through improved equality legislation. In particular, we would feel that class inequality would need to be mentioned much more, and that there needs to be a socio-economic dimension to the equality legislation. Independent statutory agencies need to be resourced to adequately, to effectively get the most out of the equality legislation. Again, not just use it as a passive tool, but to really implement it in its full spirit. And there would need to be adequate support to programmes that help people exercise their equality rights, that give them voice and give them advocacy in relation to those rights. And again, the Ryan report shows us what that means in practice. We would seek to eliminate violence and abuse targeted at specific groups in society, and Richard spoke about the relationship between inequality and violence, and to eliminate stereotyping in forms of media and advertising. And we've had policy proofing, poverty proofing. We would seek a much more robust assessment of policies for their impact on equality and social inclusion. So moving on then, and I've said very clearly democracy. What do we mean by democracy, and how do we see it in practice? This model of development, we would look to enhance the system of representative democracy. People haven't, I think, people have been talking about the economic crisis, the banking crisis, the social crisis, but it's shown up very high levels of political crisis as well, in terms of a system of democracy that's failing to meet our needs in terms of governance. We would promote a more inclusive, participatory and active democracy, and that includes this kind of space that would support civil society so greater diversity of influence is secured. And I suppose again, maybe harken back to Stacia's comment about even the range of people here shows the job we need to do to really enable voice and diversity to come through our political debate more. The kind of practical things we would do would be both institutional reform, but also civil society focused activity. So we would be looking for an independent electoral commission, and we would seek for that electoral commission to examine the issue of diversity and see in a meaningful way how it could be enabled in our democratic system, whether that's through gender or minority electoral quotas or other tools that are available to electoral systems. We would seek for greater devolution in local funding sources and increased powers of coordination for local government. Without that, we believe you can't deliver high quality, effective, efficient public services. We would be particularly keen to see participatory democracy and participation supports for those who are poorest and whose voice is less influential. That won't happen automatically, it will only happen with supports. And we would seek more diverse participation in decision making in workplaces, services and education. And again, Richard took up this theme earlier on, new models of business, new models of economic management that enable people to have much more control over their working lives and would help us deliver some of the other objectives that we have, for example, the maximum wealth objective. We would seek to look at the independence of community sector organisations' advocacy role, because there's clearly been some serious mitigation of the capacity of community and voluntary sector organisations to be advocates in political debate, so that area requires reform. And then public sector accountability through enhanced freedom of information, extending the Freedom of Information Act to a wider range of statutory agencies. And that the Public Appointments Commission would be responsible for appointments to all state boards, and that in order to break the link between political patronage and state boards, bring about greater diversity of representation, but also, we believe, fundamentally bring about more competent representation on state boards. And you know, that's a serious deficit in our representative democracy model at the moment. So that's what we're offering as a sort of a tangible reform agenda to make a better Ireland. And we believe a better Ireland is possible. And that doing it would benefit all, because it would recognise our interdependencies and our needs, and that only by working together can we actually achieve them. It would also recognise our global human and ecological interdependency, and we take that seriously in the model of development. It's not a stitch on. You know, we do hear very clearly the risk to our planet, and that if we don't respond nationally, then the models of development will be superfluous anyway. The sustainability is important, and it will enable maximum participation in all economy, society and public life. And because of all those things we're saying, our model of development would produce an economy that is efficient, that is smart, that's effective, that's productive. So we're not saying let's have the efficient, productive economy and let that trickle back to society. We're saying really clearly, build a society that is equal, that's based on high standards and inclusive participation of everybody, and what you will get from that will be a strong economy, but a sustainable one. So that's our model at the moment, and I suppose where we're finishing off with is in relation to that model earlier I showed you. And what we're kind of thinking through, using this basic schema as a way of thinking through, is that change happens through three kind of separate variables that work together. Change happens through people, through interests, actors, people making alliances because they have something they want to achieve together. They try and translate what they want to achieve together into tangible ideas and values. And then they seek spaces and places where they can convince other actors and other alliances that their ideas and values are worth taking on and working for politically to try and realise. And I suppose where we started out was a group of people coming together with a fairly blank sheet in some respects. We've developed up our ideas and our values and made them public. And what we're seeking is there a way that we can move on from today to try and realise spaces and places, action, I suppose, in terms of campaigning for a kind of social movement that could have at its heart a more sustainable model of development for Ireland. Now, we believe there is. It's very, very heartening, for example, here today, and I know Stacia made some comment about the lack of diversity, but we did make an effort today to reach out to political parties, trade unions, different groups that aren't always in the space with the community and voluntary sector. And I'm very heartened that, you know, that there's a range of political parties and political movements here. There's a large range of trade unions here, there's some ecology groups. There are groups that we don't normally share our dialogue with, and that was purposeful in terms of trying to talk to a wider range of actors. There were also a lot of spaces outside of this space where different people are pulling together alliances in different ways. So for example, on Wednesday, a group of community voluntary sector and trade unions came together to launch a budget campaign to stop social welfare cuts, to reverse the Christmas bonus, and to protect the minimum wage level. So there are lots of alliances happening anyway. We see ourselves as part of that broader picture, and we're offering today really as a space to see how we can move forward together if there is an engagement with those kind of values. So over to you.